Alright, this lesson is going to center around Chapter 1, Lesson 2, Powers and Exponents. I wanted to first show you what the tables of contents page should say. You should have a new line in your table right here where it says, mine's going to start on page 5. Yours might not start on the same page. See what page you're at. Mine's starting at page 5, and then I'm going to have written at the top of the page, powers and exponents. Let's go ahead and take a look at the lesson. So I'm going to split my page in half, and we're going to have some vocab. The first vocab we're going to have says power. So we're going to talk about what that means. The power is the product of repeated factors. Couple things to think about here. When I see the words product and factors, that should be a clue to me that I am talking about multiplication. So we're talking about multiplication. That's the first piece of vocab we need to have down. What is a power? Next, we're going to talk about what is a base. A base is the common factor. So when we talk about repeated factors, repeated means the same thing over and over. We're going to be looking at specifically what that common factor is. And next, we will have what we call an exponent. An exponent, which you may have seen before, is something that tells how many times the base is used as a factor. So a lot of pieces here. And we're going to put together what they all mean. I'm going to go over to the left side and help piece that together. Here is what a quick example could look like. Say I have 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. I'm going to start with that. I see that I have a product multiplication of repeated factors, so I'm going to rewrite that in what we call a power. What I'm going to look at is what is the common base. That common factor is the 3's. So that means, so that red line represents that is our power. It's the whole piece. I'm going to write 3 in blue because that is my common factor. And now I'm going to look at how many times did it show up. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 means I need to write an exponent on 3 of a 4. And that is a small number written slightly above the number. Call that superscript. And that tells us 3 to the power of 4, or 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So let's go into a bigger example. So going to officially start our examples. So in the examples, we're going to start with the following. Write with exponents. So we're going to take an expression and rewrite it using exponents. It'll look like the following. First example will be if I take -2 times -2 times -2 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. I'm going to rewrite this using exponents. So the first part I'm going to notice is I have quite a few -2's. I have 1, 2, 3 -2's. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 positive 3's. So here's where I'll start. I'll start with writing my first common factor. My first base is -2. Its exponent should be 3 for the 3 -2's in the expression. So that's the first power. That's going to be multiplied to, I have a common factor of 3. It shows up a total of 4 times. So this is how I would rewrite the above expression using exponents. All you're going to do is count how many times the pieces appear on the problem. All right, let's scroll down a little bit. Next example will be m times m times n times n times m times 3 times 3. And we're going to have a couple different pieces here. Let's start with the first common factor I see is I have 1m, I have 2 m's, I have 3 m's. So I'm going to rewrite that as m to the third times. Next I have 1n and 2 n's, so I can write that as n to the second times. I have 1 3, I have 2 3's, so that is 3 squared. Now, I was only asked to write with exponents. You were not asked to simplify anything, so this would be our answer. Now, you can see this written in a couple different ways. Multiplication allows us to write our factors in whatever order we want. One of the things you might commonly see is that we try to write these in alphabetical order, and we try to put all of our numbers first. So for example, an equivalent way of writing this is 3 squared times m to the third times n squared. Our numbers followed by our letters in alphabetical order. Let's look at 2 questions, 3 more, where you might be asked to evaluate using powers. So now we're going to evaluate. It means we're actually going to solve until we get one number as an answer. We're going to start with the example of -2/3 to the 4th power. Well, what that 4th power tells me to do is I'm going to rewrite this as negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3. And then I'm going to go through and multiply them together. The way we can do this is when you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerators together and then the denominators together. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So my numerator is 16. I want you to notice that I have a negative times a negative, which would make those positive. Negative times a negative would make those positive, so my answer is positive. And now I look at the 3's. I'm going to switch colors just to make sure this is easier to see. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81. So I get an answer of 16 over 81. All right. Next example. Evaluate negative 2 to the 6th power. That means negative 2 times 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 negative 2. Now, that probably got really annoying hearing me say negative 2 over and over. That might help you understand why we use exponents to make that a little easier to say. Now, I'm going to show you another way to process multiplying these. In the end, as long as you're okay with multiplying them, you can use whatever method you want. But one way to look at is the following. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. This negative 2 times negative 2 is also positive 4. And this pair of negative 2's also becomes positive 4. Now, I'm going to go ahead and look at these 4's. That is positive 16. I'm going to bring down the positive 4. And now I'm going to look at what is 16 times 4. That gives me an answer of 64. So negative 2 to the 6th power is 64. We are still all on the same page as we started our notes. I'm going to go back up because there's one hint I would like to give you before the last example. So I'm going to go back up over to the left side where all of my vocab is, and I'm going to add to it a hint. And this hint will pop up anytime that we look at these exponents. There's a couple special cases, and the one I want to point out to you today is what happens when I have a 0 exponent. For an exponent of 0, we'll say any number with an exponent of 0 equals 1. Now, it's an oversimplification, There is a rule that it's not every number, but every case you're going to see, this will be true for. So in short, any number, I'm going to call it a, to the 0 power always equals 1. The only side rule to that is a cannot equal 0. So we can't have 0 to the 0 power. That just won't work. Let's take a look at the last example, and then I'm going to post some for you guys to try as a side. So this is going to be directly under my last example. We are still evaluating, but you're going to be asked to evaluate when you'll be given that, let's see, we could say A equals 3 and B equals 5. And you're asked to evaluate the following: A minus B, the quantity is in parentheses, squared. So let's take a look at what happens. First, I'm going to change some colors to make this easier to see. Make this red. A little bit of red versus blue. First thing I need to do is, well, if A equals 3, I'm going to go in, and every time I see an A, I'm going to replace it with a 3, because A equals 3. Since B equals 5, everywhere I see a B, I'm going to put a 5. And I'm going to continue from there. So this equals, well, 3 minus 5 is negative 2 squared. And now I'm going to evaluate that using what I know about exponents. This means negative 2 times negative 2, giving me a final answer of positive 4. So those are the main examples that go with this lesson. In a moment, I'm going to pull on the screen some examples for you to try, and then to come back and check your answers. Here are 5 examples I would like you to try. I apologize. Use your notes and the rest of this video to see how you can do. At this point, pause the video, answer all 5 questions, and start the video again to see the solutions. Alright, check out your solutions and see how they compare to mine. The only thing I would want to point out, and I'll use a highlighter for this, is notice that when I need to take a negative number and raise it to a power, I put it inside the parentheses to make sure that I'm being careful and that I am also copying that negative for every time I see that power. As you see in this step, that negative goes with the 4. Another important factor will be when it comes to fractions, make sure you put fractions in parentheses with the exponent on the outside.